Hello there, I'm Kirifa Zachary and you're watching All 24 News World News program live from the capital Algiers. Up next are the top stories. Algerian President Abdelmadjid Tebboune receives a request from Germany for a pardon for writer Balam Sensal. Somali President, meanwhile, Hassan Sheikh Mohamud arrives in Algeria on an official visit, and French historian Benjamin Stora calls on France to officially acknowledge its colonial crimes in Algeria. Coming up next, the Polisario Front reaffirmed the Sahrawi people's right to self-determination. A march is planned in Madrid in support of the Sahrawi freedom, and diaspora communities are calling for a quick, just resolution to the conflict. Also in our news, in Gaza, 2 Palestinians, including a child, were killed as occupation forces continue to violate the ceasefire. Hamas is urging mediators to pressure the entity, while the Euro-Mediterranean Human Rights Monitor says the occupation is using the truce to further destroy the Strip. And later on in Ukraine, 1 person was killed in a Russian-controlled area of Kherson. Russia says it destroys a strategic airport meant for F-16s and accused Europe of giving Kiev false hopes of military victory. The details are straight ahead. Welcome back to the program. It's great to have you with us tonight. First up in our news, the case of writer Balam Sensal is back in the spotlight. Algerian President Abdelmadjid Tebboune received a request from German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier to pardon Sensal, who has been in prison for a year, and allow him to travel to Germany for medical treatment. The Algerian presidency noted that Balam Sensal, an Algerian French citizen and recipient of the Peace Prize from the German Writers Association on July 1st, was sentenced in Algeria to prison and a fine.
I have asked my Algerian counterpart to pardon Balam Sensal. This gesture would be an expression of humanity and sound political vision, and it also reflects my strong personal relationship with President Tebboune and the excellent relations between our 2 countries.
In another development, Somali President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud arrived in Algeria on Monday for an official visit. He was welcomed at Algiers airport by the Speaker of the National People's Assembly, or the lower house of Parliament, Ibrahim Boughali, along with senior government officials. The visit aims to strengthen fraternal ties between Algeria and Somalia, boosting cooperation and partnership on issues of common interest. And as you followed in our headlines, French historian Benjamin Stora has called on France to officially recognize its colonial crimes in Algeria, including massacres and land confiscations. Speaking on our channel at Ibdu Show on Sunday, Stora described these acts during the colonial period as horrific and crimes against humanity.
Reconnaissance officielle par la France des assassinats.
France's official recognition of Algeria's horrific colonial period began in 1830 and was marked by decades of colonialism, during which Algerians were stripped of their land and identity, the plundering of their wealth, assassinations of leading figures, crimes against humanity, all for the sake of destroying the Algerian nation.
De ce qu'a été la nation algérienne.
On the same occasion, Stora also accused the far right of trying to downplay France's colonial massacres in Algeria. He said he's faced attacks from those nostalgic for French Algeria because of his writings and stance on remembering colonial crimes.
L'extrême droite
What I fear is the rise of the extreme right to power. Those people never wanted to hear anything about the massacres committed against Algerians, such as the one of May and October, or the nuclear test. The truth about the French occupation of Algeria must be revealed. There is a battle raging in France, led by the extreme right, to rewrite history about the colonial period.
Sora also called for building new bridges between France and Algeria through historical dialogue, highlighting President Abdelmadjid Tebboun's initiative to set up the joint Algerian-French Committee for History and Memory.
C'est qu'une histoire aussi longue, aussi compliquée et cruelle qui a duré 132 ans.
The issue of memory requires great work on history if we truly want to build new bridges between France and Algeria. It has already started through the initiative launched by Algerian President Abdelmadjid Tebboune, which consists of establishing the Algerian-French Joint Committee on History and Memory.
Disons de commencer un travail.
And speaking of memory, in Lille, France, the Algerian community marked the 71st anniversary of the War of Liberation in a ceremony at the Algerian Consulate General. Veterans attended, and the Consul General paid tribute to the martyrs and war veterans, highlighting the nation-building period and the community's strong ties to Algeria.
I was a veteran in 1957. I was studying when the secret intelligence system contacted me, and I remained in the intelligence service until the end of the revolution. I continued my studies there until independence.
Today I was invited to the Consulate General to celebrate with them the anniversary of November 1st. It is a great honor for me. Praise to be God, and may God have mercy on all the martyrs.
I am very happy to be present today at the ceremony held in the city of Lille, a city well known for its Algerian community, proud of its roots and traditions. I would like to sincerely thank Mr. Mohamed Mazharan, the Consul General in Lille, for its kind invitation. Today we are celebrating the commemoration of the outbreak of the Algerian Liberation Revolution. I wish all the best for our country. May peace and security always prevail. God willing, long live Algeria.
Still with Algeria-related news, but this time economy, the Algerian government expects to keep its economic growth on the rise thanks to fiscal reforms and a boost in non-hydrocarbon sectors. Here's Sofiane Kinturi.
Algeria's draft finance law for the next year lays out big expectations, predicting that the economy will grow faster than global average over the next 3 years. Officials project GDP growth of about 4.1% next year, climbing to 4.5% by 2028. Much of that momentum, they say, comes from non-oil sectors, now driving country's economic transformation, with growth expected to top 5%. Agriculture is one of the bright spots. Its contribution to the economy is set to rise from $45 billion next year to nearly $55 billion by 2028. The industrial sector is also expected to grow, reaching around $24 billion, while hydrocarbons will continue to play a strong role, adding at least $40 billion to national output. The draft budget projects total spending of more than $130 billion, hitting a new record of $142 billion by 2028. Revenues are estimated at over $61.6 billion. Supported by broad structural reforms and ongoing efforts to diversify the economy beyond oil and gas. Officials say this trajectory could push Algeria's GDP to $400 billion within 3 years, marking a major milestone in the country's economic recovery. The plan also keeps a strong social focus, dedicating more than $44 billion to social transfers, like unemployment benefits, pensions, and subsidies for essential goods. Another $20 billion will go toward universities and hospitals. For the government, this budget signals more than just record numbers. It's a declaration of a new phase of recovery and confidence, combining robust growth with social justice at its core.
Moving on to another regional news, the Polisario Front has reaffirmed the Sahrawi people's right to self-determination and independence. Following a cabinet meeting in the refugee camps on Sunday, the Sahrawi presidency said resolve in the Western Sahara conflict depends on fully guaranteeing these rights. in line with the UN Charter.
After listening to a special presentation from the Minister of Foreign Affairs and African Affairs on the discussions of the UN Security Council and its adoption of the Resolution 2797, the Council of Ministers reaffirmed that there is no solution to the Western Sahara conflict except one that guarantees the Sahrawi people's inalienable, non-negotiable and imprescriptible right to self-determination and independence in accordance with the Charter of the United Nations.
In the same context, the Spanish solidarity movement with the Sahrawi people plans a march in Madrid next Saturday to support self-determination, freedom, and independence. Activist Manuel de la Rosa Hernandez said the march marks 50 years since the ill-fated Madrid Agreement and is a reminder to Spain to back efforts for a just, lasting solution that lets the Sahrawi people exercise full sovereignty.
This march comes 50 years after the signing of the ill-fated Madrid Agreement, which allowed Morocco to occupy Western Sahara. It is an important opportunity to remind the Spanish government of its duty to support all political initiatives aimed at reaching a just and a final solution through a referendum that enables the Sahrawi people to exercise their inalienable right to independence and sovereignty over their land and resources. As trade unions, social organizations, international solidarity groups, and leftist movements, we must strongly support the march in solidarity with the Sahrawi people next Saturday.
On a similar note, the Sahrawi community in France and Northern Europe is calling on the international community to speed up a just and lasting solution for Western Sahara, guaranteeing the Sahrawi people's right to freedom. At their annual meeting near Paris on Sunday, they reaffirmed their support for the Polisario Front as the sole legitimate representative, held Morocco responsible for blocking UN efforts, and praised the steadfastness of political prisoners and civilians. They also urged national unity, organized action in Europe, and confirmed participation in a Brussels demonstration on December 11th against EU attempts to bypass court rulings.
This is a great source of pride for our community in France to host this annual meeting, especially at such a crucial time for the Sahrawi people's cause and their struggle at the UN Security Council and within the European Union against parties seeking to undermine their cause and plunder their resources.
In another story, a new FAO report highlights a growing malnutrition crisis in Morocco, affecting about 2.7 million people, most of them children under 5. The UN agency warns that food scarcity is reaching alarming levels and could seriously impact the health of an entire generation. Here's Karim Mustafawi.
According to FAO's latest World Food Security and Nutrition Map, about 2.7 million people in Morocco are suffering from malnutrition. In other words, around 7% of the population is struggling to secure enough nutritious food. The report contradicts the Moroccan government's claims of steady economic growth, pointing instead to a worrying decline in living conditions and access to proper nutrition. The issue extends beyond food scarcity to a lack of dietary diversity, as many households are struggling to afford healthy and balanced meals. Children are among the most affected. The FAO estimates that nearly 30% of Moroccan children under the age of 5 suffer from stunted growth, a condition that can have lifelong consequences for their health. While Moroccan authorities point to positive economic indicators, the FAO report tells a very different story. Behind the image of prosperity, it reveals the country still grappling with deep-rooted social and nutritional challenges.
Meanwhile, Moroccan human rights activists and politicians are questioning the official account of anti-normalization activist Sayena Sidan's death. At his funeral in Casablanca, members of the Moroccan Association for Human Rights, political parties, and colleagues called for an impartial investigation, saying the circumstances of his death 3 months ago point to a possible assassination, challenging the Moroccan judiciary's vision.
The investigations into this case do not satisfy the need for truth, nor do they establish the facts as they should. The man, while in full possession of his mental and physical abilities, fell from a tree in the yard of his home and slipped into a coma that lasted 3 months. Doctors said that Zarani is capable of recovery, but given these statements and the ongoing investigation, I believe we must dig deeper and uncover the full truth about this man's case. We demand clarity because there is great ambiguity surrounding what happened to him. We will not let this matter pass unnoticed. We will continue to pursue the truth and ensure that all reports are revealed as they should be.
Moving on to another topical development. 2 Palestinians, including a child, were killed and others injured in a Zionist airstrike Monday in Beni Suhaila, east of Khan Yunis in southern Gaza. Occupation forces continue to violate the ceasefire, carrying out heavy airstrikes, demolitions, and drone overflights across Gaza City and Khan Yunis. Since the ceasefire began, 243 Palestinians have been killed, 619 wounded, and 528 bodies recovered. Overall, the genocidal war on Gaza that started on October 7, 2023, has left more than 69,178 martyrs and over 170,690 wounded. For its part, Hamas is urging mediators to pressure the occupation to stop its repeated violations of the Gaza ceasefire. In a Monday statement, the movement reaffirmed a strict commitment to the agreement and said 271 Palestinians have been killed due to Zionist attacks. Hamas also outlined 13 key demands, including the immediate and restricted operation of UNRWA, calling on international mediators to ensure the entity complies.
The occupation has continuously undermined and violated the agreement, fabricating pretexts and targeting civilians, with 271 Palestinians martyred from bombardment and deliberate gunfire. It systematically demolishes homes beyond the yellow line, blocks UNRWA aid, and keeps the Rafah crossing closed since March 18, 2025, violating the entry of at least 608 trucks daily. Strict adherence to the Sharm el-Sheikh ceasefire is required, an immediate halt to killings and violations, withdrawal along the agreed provisional line, and allowing all agreed aid and fuel while granting UNRWA full freedom to operate in Gaza.
Meanwhile, the Euro-Mediterranean Human Rights Monitor says Israel is using the Gaza ceasefire as a cover to keep destroying life in the Strip. In a Monday statement, the group warned that without international oversight, the occupation is committing acts of genocide, blocking about 70% of aid due under the agreement and flooding Gaza with hazardous goods while restricting essential supplies.
Since the ceasefire, the Israeli army has killed 242 Palestinians, averaging more than 1 death per day, and injured around 619 others over 20 daily. Israel continues committing acts of genocide through various methods, imposing deadly living conditions on 2 million Palestinians and denying them recovery from the humanitarian disaster, ongoing for more than 25 months.
In another story, Nasser Medical Complex reported on Sunday evening that a child was killed by an unexploded device in Khan Yunis just hours after another child died the same way. The mayor, Ala ad-Din al-Batta, told Al-Aqsa TV that Gaza still holds around 20,000 tons of unexploded ordnance, a constant threat to residents and a major obstacle to reconstruction. Khan Yunis alone has 340,000 tons of rubble to clear. 1 month after the ceasefire in Gaza, life for displaced families remains a daily struggle. With little aid, no sign of recovery, and continuous Zionist violations of the shadow of war still looms over thousands of residents. Here's Zahra Fajani.
1 month after the ceasefire agreement in Gaza, life for displaced families remains a daily struggle, with little aid and no sign of recovery. 37-year-old Mohammed Antiz, once a taxi driver, now lives with his family in a tent in Gaza City. His home was destroyed for the third time in 15 years.
We have been hoping for the war to end so that aid could come in to help us. But even after the ceasefire, we haven't received any assistance. Occasionally, we got a small amount of bread, sometimes only once every 3 days. That little bit was barely enough for one meal for the whole family and disappears quickly.
Inside the shelter, Mohammed's children try to find moments of normalcy. They draw on the pictures of olive trees, doves, and fruit, small symbols of hope in a life overshadowed by the Zionist genocide.
We really want to eat meat or something else, but we can't afford it. Actually, it's not just me. My sisters feel the same way. We all want to eat delicious food. Meat rolls, fruit, bananas, oranges. We also want to go out for a walk and have some fun.
Life now is just suffering. We are in pain 24 hours a day. There is no water, no heat, no decent clothes, nothing. We suffer every day.
Antiz's home was destroyed twice during wars in 2008 and 2014. Just as he began to rebuild, the 2023 war saw his house bombed for a third time. Since then, his family has faced continuous displacement, struggling for food, water, and even firewood.
They say the war is over, but how can it be? My house was completely destroyed. Why is it over? The borders aren't fully open and there is not enough food or aid. How can they say the war is over? I feel no end and we continue to live under the shadow of war.
For the Antiz family and thousands like them, the ceasefire is far from a relief. With the ongoing occupation, their lives remain defined by uncertainty and deprivation. In Gaza, 1 month after the fighting has stopped, the struggle for survival goes on.
And in the occupied West Bank, occupation forces carried out a major raid early Monday, arresting at least 20 Palestinians. Those detained include police officers from Al Khalil, residents from Salfit, Ramallah, including a child, Nablus, Ariha, and Kalkilia. Meanwhile, over 1,000 settlers stormed Al Aqsa Mosque in Al Quds, performing Talmudic rituals and provocative tours under heavy occupation protection, while Palestinian worshippers were blocked from entering. And elsewhere in the Middle East, President Donald Trump praised Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara, saying they get along well and expressing confidence in his leadership. The rare endorsement comes amid U.S. sanctions relief and signals Washington's willingness to re-engage with Damascus, a move welcomed by some but raising concerns about oversight.
I've had an agreement with him. He's a very strong leader. He comes from a very tough place, and he's a tough guy. I liked him. I get along with him. The new president of Syria. And we'll do everything we can to make Syria successful, because that's part of the Middle East. We have peace now in the Middle East, first time that anyone can remember that ever happening.
Over to Europe now. Tensions are rising as diplomacy between Moscow and Kiev stalls. A Ukrainian attack on Russian-controlled Kherson killed 1 person and wounded 2, reportedly using Oregon rocket launchers with cluster munitions. Meanwhile, Russia destroyed a strategic Ukrainian airfield housing F-16s and Mirage jets. Over the past 24 hours, Russian air defenses reportedly shot down 124 Ukrainian drones, intercepted HIMARS missiles, and destroyed drone boats in the Black Sea. Russian forces also seized 3 towns in Zaporizhia and Donetsk, consolidating control in eastern Ukraine. Meanwhile, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said Monday that talks on Ukraine have stalled. He accused European countries of misleading Kiev, convincing the Ukrainian government it could win militarily, even as the situation on the ground shows Russian forces making gains.
We prefer that this conflict be resolved through diplomatic means, and the Russian side remains open to that. However, there is currently a standstill, and certainly not because of us. The Kiev regime is being incited in every possible way by the Europeans, making them believe that Ukraine can win the war through military means. This is deep illusion, given the situation on the battlefield.
Moving on to another development in Sudan, the Mashhad Human Rights Observatory says over 11,000 civilians have been killed and more than 30,000 injured by the Rapid Support Forces in El Fasher. The group adds that over 60,000 people remain trapped in the city, with more than 2,000 arrested, some held in secret detention and tortured. Meanwhile, the International Organization for Migration reports nearly 89,000 people have been displaced from El Fasher since late October, with thousands more fleeing North Kordofan due to worsening insecurity and attacks on civilians. For its part, Doctors Without Borders in Sudan warns of a serious funding crisis. The UN's aid appeal has only received about 25% of what's needed, making it nearly impossible to meet urgent humanitarian needs. MSF's head in Sudan, Ali Sareen, says there is currently no way to provide medical care in El Fasher. Over 5,000 displaced people who arrived this week in Tawila, North Darfur, are facing dire conditions, with famine spreading, especially among children. Elsewhere, the United States hit the 41st day of paralyzing government shutdown, a crisis that has left federal workers unpaid, disrupted air travel, and pushed millions of Americans toward food insecurity. Yasin Rikti reports now.
Across the USA, federal workers are feeling the impact of the government shutdown as it hits the 41st day. From airport security agents to air traffic controllers, employees remain without pay, while food banks report long lines reminiscent of the pandemic.
We have federal workers that were suffering. We have TSA agents. We have airport controllers. And we were seeing lines to our food banks in northern Nevada. These were lines that I hadn't seen since the pandemic.
At the center of the standoff, President Donald Trump's proposed healthcare cuts, a plan critics call draconian. The irony, some says, is that while Trump pushes austerity for social programs, he's advocating for a record $1 trillion defense budget for 2026.
The real question is, why would a president of the United States pit hungry children against sick children? And that is what President Trump has done. I mean, this is outrageous. We can't reach agreement on government funding, so the government shuts down. And even though the law is clear that he could fund SNAP benefits during a shutdown, he did not. And then he also said, and by the way, I don't really care if people's health insurance premiums get so high they can't afford their care. That's on Donald Trump.
On the other side, the president says he sees light at the end of the tunnel. Speaking after attending a Washington Commanders NFL game, he suggested the shutdown may soon end.
That's what deal we're talking about. But if it's a deal I heard about, that's certainly, they want to change the deal a little bit. But I would say so. I think based on everything I'm hearing, they haven't changed anything. And we have support from enough Democrats. And we're going to be opening up our country. It's too bad it was closed, but we'll be opening up our country very quickly.
Some hope arrived Sunday when the Senate advanced a stopgap funding bill to keep the government running until January 30th, pending approval from the House and the White House.
I'm thankful to welcome you to what appears to be the beginning of the end of the longest government shutdown in U.S. history, as shameful as that is. I don't think it's coincidental, you know how I think, but it's after 40 days of wandering in the wilderness and making the American people suffer needlessly, some Senate Democrats finally have stepped forward to end the pain.
But the human cost continues. Air travel remains chaotic, with over 2,800 flights cancelled and 10,000 delayed on Sunday alone. Airlines like Delta are cutting routes as unpaid air traffic controllers increasingly call in sick. The timing could hardly be worse, with Thanksgiving travel just weeks away. As the shutdown drags on, America's political divisions are now threatening not just governance, but the everyday lives of millions of its citizens.
And now it's time to catch up on other news stories making headlines, and the news in brief this time with Salman Assad.
The African Union has urged international action over Mali's worsening security crisis. In a Sunday statement, the African Union Commission voiced deep concern about the grave humanitarian situation, blaming terrorist group for a fuel blockade and supply disruptions. It also called for a coordinated global response to fight terrorism and violent extremism in the Sahel. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth announced Monday that 6 people were killed in the 2 strikes targeting what the U.S. military said were suspected drug smuggling boats. In a post on X, Hegseth said the strikes were carried out Sunday in international waters in the East Pacific, hitting 2 vessels, each carrying 3 people. China's Ministry of Transport will suspend port fees on U.S. vessels for 1 year and delay investigations affecting shipping and shipbuilding. Separately, the Ministry of Commerce lifted 1-year sanctions on South Korea's Hanwha Ocean, which has U.S. ties. The death toll from Typhoon Tino in the Philippines has reached 224, with over 1 million displaced by Typhoon Fanwong. Authorities report 109 missing as schools closed, flights were cancelled, and heavy rains raised fears of major flooding.
And that's the end of our news. Thank you for watching and take care.